For 21st century city kids, bathed in an onslaught of bad news and frightening images, it's a world that is hard to imagine. The early 1940s, when kids were free and protected at the same time, when the world seemed simpler and safer before the horrors of World War II really came home. For Ralph Bongard, the young son of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, life was good, but the undercurrents were there. They still are. His essay is called My First Violence.
During my green age, I was barely aware of what was unfolding over there. It was the spring of 1941, and with my chums, I flitted about our downtown Toronto streets free and easy. But mostly I was coddled by my parents, firmly safeguarded. They had met in Toronto, and there was now precious little news from their families still in Europe. The world was awash with violence, but the weekend papers only touched the surface. Dispatches from the camps had not yet crossed the Atlantic, and when they did, they were viewed with skepticism. I was not privy to any of this, but our home pulsed with emotional murmurings. If there was a stout knocking on our front door, both parents appeared to stiffen. My mother suffered herself to send me to school unaccompanied, though her concern for my well-being was boundless. She exhibited an old-world seasoning. She believed that anything not in her field of view had the potential to be fraught with violence. She called the imagined instigators and bullies I might encounter Cossacks. Like a precinct duty sergeant, she admonished her young charge, wagging her finger and growling, "Be careful out there. It's a slaughterhouse." One day, I came to understand a little of what she meant. I sat alone in the nurse's room on a hard Board of Education issue wooden chair, a thermometer under my tongue, my teeth gingerly clenching the glass as ordered, although at times they would involuntarily chatter. I had heard the account of someone in a grade ahead in a similar situation who, in a violent fit of sneezing, ended up with a mouthful of broken glass and a lap skittering with mercury beads. I was 9 at the time and dangerously skinny. I squirmed about to find comfort. Posters along the wall outlined the classic food groups and their inherent wholesomeness. They looked nothing like any of the spreads my mother offered. Most egregious was the bottle of milk standing next to a plump pink pork chop. And I had never seen a wedge of cheese on our table. My mother brought home a soft, crumbly cheese that had been stuffed into a gauzy sock. "Go directly home. I'll call your mother," said the nurse. "You have a slight fever." It was the end of March, and in the deserted Lansdowne Public School playground, a raw wind was churning up winter's detritus of dust and wrappers. Turning down my cap's ear flaps, bracing myself, squinting into the gusts, I made for a narrow laneway, a sort of unofficial public footpath between two houses, so narrow that a slight rotation of the shoulders was obligatory. Emerging from the laneway onto Major Street, I noticed a hushed crowd on the pavement 2-3 houses to the north. Some people spilled onto the road. 2 women, their faces turned, were walking arm in arm toward me. One thumped her chest with a fist. "Oi, oi." I wormed my way through. It must have been only minutes before that a bakery wagon had toppled over, spilling brown paper bags of Kaiser rolls, onion buns, bagels, and coffee rings onto the road. The horse, still girdled in its traces, had keeled over in some form of a seizure, taking the wagon with it. Its forelegs kicked at the curb, its great neck rose and fell back like a landed fish. The skull thudded on the asphalt. The driver urged the animal to rise. "Bubbala, bubbala. Sweetheart, sweetheart." He encircled the neck, straining, trying to raise it, to keep it from smacking down again. Above the wild eyes, one now filled with blood, the horse's eyelashes flickered, its cheeks heaved, a yellow foam bubbled from its mouth and nostrils. From its rear, balls of dung, one by one, as if portioned out, tumbled onto the road. Soon a policeman arrived, followed by a man in a fedora carrying a satchel. The driver was pulled away by two men and sat down on the curb, his head rolling back and forth in his cupped hands. He wept, his shoulders quaking. A leather change purse, attached to a strap that ran across his chest, military style, rattled with coins. The man standing behind grasped his shoulders, trying to give comfort, at the same time holding the bakery man firmly in place. One of the women, a friend of my mother's, came up and turned me away. I heard the report of a gun. It stung the back of my neck, crackled like an electric shock throughout my 9-year-old spindly frame. I was given a slight push that sent me shuffling in the direction of my home. Soon I was sprinting, away from my first violence, away from the Cossacks. As a slip of a youth, I absorbed the putting down of the horse as some significant soul-rending act of carnage. This heady episode I witnessed, burrowed under my skin, and till this day it remains there. The flopping of the old dray horse, the cruel snap of the pistol. Initially I believed it would protect me against other acts of violence. The opposite is true. When I come face to face with wanton cruelty displayed in the weekend newspaper, my body thrums to the memory of the fallen horse. My mother was right. One must be vigilant. The Cossacks are still out there. For the Sunday edition, I'm Ralph Bongard in Toronto.
And that's all the time we have for this first hour of the Sunday edition. In our next hour,